Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' base capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening. Wow, that was random. Exceptional Radio. Good afternoon. It is 9/20/2020. People are poaching starfish. Bastards. Fucking bastards. The world's on fire. Within our lifetimes, the South will be uninhabitable. And, I'm not sure, I can't even remember what the figure is, but it's an inordinate amount of money has been donated to progressive and liberal groups following the passing of a Supreme Court justice. And, we're just sitting here wondering, why did it take that event for this money to get funneled into these accounts? Why wasn't the support there before?
Yeah, it's super bittersweet. I'm like very frustrated from this past week for a few reasons.
I mean, a few.
Yeah, I'm obviously I'm not trying to bring the entire show down. And that's kind of where it's like, I don't like shaming people for how they express grief, because that's not cool at all. The problem is what happened in this past week was not even grief. People were like worried about, it was the most narcissistic fucking response possible. People were so worried about themselves before this woman's body was even cold. Like, I could not even understand what her family must have been going through, because I'm still in shock from losing Chadwick Boseman. And it's like one of these things where I'm like, people have let their emotions become too dead to the point where it's like, you can't grieve that fast. Like, grieving is a process that takes so long, where I'm like, y'all need to fucking chill the fuck out for a goddamn week. Wait till the woman is fucking buried before you even start talking this bullshit. Like, I don't care what side you're on. Just wait till the woman is fucking buried until you even just remotely mention that shit. I was pissed when people were talking about who they were going to recast Chadwick Boseman with in Black Panther 2. What's Disney? Shut the fuck up.
The shittiest part about it all is I was taking a nap and I woke up to that. And so I woke up in the middle of the internet freaking out about the Supreme Court justice appointment and the list that had been published a week prior. And all of this, no, but I mean, I'm not gonna lie. There are some people on my feed who had been long time, like, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, championing or cheerleading her work. But I want to be really generous. I'm going to say it's like less than 5% of the feed that I see was, cheerleading her efforts. And then I wake up and that's all it was. And then not only that, a good at least 50% of it was, what's next? What do we do next? How do we mobilize? What are we going to do about about McConnell and all this shit? And it's like, I think you put it quite bluntly. That shit's gross. It's just gross.
I was so grossed out watching people who identify as left or liberal just flippantly talk past this woman's not yet cold body about how this is going to impact their lives, not realizing how disconnected and narcissistic that response is, and then trying to take moral high ground against what they perceive to be as something that hasn't happened yet. And it's the craziest shit that these people are taking a moral high ground against a hypothetical scenario that hasn't even unfolded in advanced time, because it's not even in real time. They've gone ahead because she's dead. Yes, we don't know what's gonna happen. We don't know if the Republicans are gonna try to fucking vote on a nomination. We don't know if the Senate will do that or not. So let's not speculate about that shit until we get there, because speculating is completely pointless. Now, the fact that people went so far into the speculation before this woman's body was yet cold is goddamn gross. I was so disappointed to see people, like, again, who claim to be empathetic people, who claim to have feelings and emotions, just acting like fucking gross team. I'm a Democrat. What's this gonna do to the man? This shit was so fucking gross. I was so disappointed in humanity, because that's how the right wing is supposed to act. The left is supposed to act like that. The left is supposed to be the people who take a moment and say, fuck, we lost a great one. This is gonna, like, I I should have been, if I cared about her legacy and how much she impacted the world, I should be too fucking shook up to tweet. I remember when Tupac died. I was like 13, and because of the impact on my life, that shit made me cry. I couldn't imagine fucking tweeting out what was happening when I was like, when I heard about Tupac dying on the fucking radio, let alone going to, oh, what's going to be Suge Knight? All these people, there were so many people who were speculating about Tupac's death within that first week. And I'm like, hold on, the dude's dead. What are we, like, why are we talking about this? Just fucking take a minute and
Well,
breathe and
that's the reality TV
permit.
effect, isn't it? Everyone feels involved because they waited with bated breath for the latest update of their I don't know what I mean to call it. You know, this morning I read this opinion piece about emotional intelligence, and it was trying to divine or differentiate the difference between empathy, sympathy, and pity. And basically, pity is one of these things that you can just have. I feel sorry for that. But then sympathy requires a little bit of effort. You have to sympathize with somebody. You have to try and feel for them, or try to. But to truly empathize, you have to understand. You have to, like, take that moment to stop and forget about what you are and who you are, and try to fully understand where somebody is coming from. And it's hard. And I don't think the internet is actually the best place to try and empathize. And you can't really display empathy on the internet because it's such a flat, two-dimensional experience.
Yeah, and it's definitely not a full portrayal of the person that you're trying to empathize with. So then it's weird to try to empathize with a sliver of a person's personality. Then it becomes this really scattered delusion of empathy that's really not, it's not even empathizing with what the person you believe to be empathizing with. It's just a abstract representation of that person.
Yeah.
Because then I'm like trying to think about it. I'm like, okay, this woman was 87. My grandma was 91 when she died. I could not imagine 4 years before that trying to have her be the arbiter of democracy, almost on her own back. Because then I look at it, what kind of, if this single individual is really as much of an arbiter of democracy as we are saying, or not we, as these people are saying, the ones that are freaking out about what they believe to be the implications, are we saying we want an 87-year-old person to be having that weight on their fucking shoulders? Is that not what I mean? Because then I'm looking at it like, why it doesn't, it could be a 35-year-old person.
We're not asking our grandparents to do the heavy lifting.
We would,
We shouldn't be asking our grandparents to do the heavy lifting.
should we be asking any individual, should we, is that democracy if a single individual can carry that much of the weight? Is that an actual democracy, or are we all just in an oligarchy that we've renamed? Because I don't feel like okay, the entire premise of the three branch system was to prevent a single party from having control of the entire government. If now a single person dying is the point at which the single party or a single party has taken over all three branches, isn't that proof that this system is not what it claimed to be, and it's actually just a preservation of an oligarchy? Because that's, if that happens, if that's the case, that's what this entire system was meant to prevent. So then we have to say we got to throw this whole fucking system out now, because the entire thing that it was designed to prevent just fucking happened. So all these people who are talking about, oh, what is the what's happening? Like, they're not ready to throw out the system. They're just trying to use it as a voting point. So all those people, unless they're ready to throw out this fucking entire system, they need to shut the entire fuck up, because that's the actual implication.
You
This
know, I
that
uh, I think that the internet revealed to us who the actual president is. His name is Mitch McConnell. Cheeto Mussolini is a cheerleader, but Mitch McConnell is the guy who's actually running the show at this point. I think it's pretty obvious that's the case.
I don't know. I really struggle. Like, it's never been a single person, because what ends up happening is there's always figureheads that get put out. It's a fucking hydra, man. There's never a single figurehead that's going to be the head of the snake, because then if you could cut it off, if Mitch McConnell became a single point of the Republican Party and white supremacy infrastructure, that's the actual patriarchy incarnate, then it could be cut off. And that's like, it's, there's so many layers to it at this point, that when we talk, like, the idea or a notion of a single head, a single figurehead, is a fucking lie. A king was never just the single point. There was always a council, there was always a court, there was always a group of people who were influencing that king and were ready to fucking stab that motherfucker in the back and replace him with his son or his nephew or his wife, if they did not have the shit aligned with their interests. And that's why it's like, you can't have a king without the fucking military that's ready to enforce his rule at the tip of the spear. And that's why the notion of a single ruler is always a fucking lie. It's always an illusion. So this is why I'm saying, like, yeah, there's puppets within that. Donald Trump is obviously a puppet, but this is where I'm saying, like, at this point, this whole illusion of democracy is, it's fallen apart within the span of 6 months. And people who are, I think they believe themselves to be on the left, are now trying to basically reinforce the patriarchy by sticking to this paradigm of this broken ass system. And this is why I'm saying they're fucking phony. I'm calling them out right now. They're fucking phony, man. All these people who think they're left, they're actually on the right. They actually want fascism, because at the end of the day, it makes them fucking comfortable to know that, oh, it's not my fault if this shit happens, because I can blame the Republicans. These Republicans are actually the ones doing it. I didn't want to go out and fight against this fucking bullshit system. So I just sat at fucking Facebook and tweeted about or wrote status updates about how, oh my God, RIP RBG. This is what you get when you didn't vote. And it's like all these fucking people who are trying to then throw back and blame people in 2016 when Hillary fucking won the popular vote in the first place. It's because of these fuckers who didn't want to fight the goddamn electoral college that now we have this system that is effectively shown the patriarchy is what has been trying to prop up the entire fucking time. It was never going to allow equality. It was never meant to allow equality.
Well,
And the whole thing's illusion.
I'm still disappointed by the whole Bernie Forever crowd who was so disenfranchised by the DNC scandal that didn't vote, because we know that there are 100,000 people didn't vote, and I'm pretty certain there's a significant number of that group that were like Bernie or bust. And those.
Wait, hold on. Why should we vote?
The popular vote. You can't blame those people. That narrative is broken, and this is why I'm saying the DNC keeps perpetuating that narrative to then blame people when it's the electoral college. That's the problem.
No, the electoral problem is definitely the problem. But there was an opportunity that we had to prevent, Cheeto Mussolini from getting into the office. I think that was more important than
what. Can I ask? What do you think would be different in?
Oh, with Hillary?
Yeah.
I think we wouldn't have had this. We would have had a different response to a lot of things.
Okay, COVID. I don't think America was equipped to take.
I agree.
They, who was it? Chuck Schumer said, we got to get the economy going. It would have been the same response. I think you still would have had the right wing and conspiracy theorist chuds not wearing masks and taking it seriously. I think the people in charge and with money would still
be in charge.
Try to get. Yeah, they'd want to push people back into the meat grinder of capitalism. So I don't think COVID would have been that different. I think
there are 200 federal judges that have been appointed in the last 3 years that are all conservative as fuck. None of those people would have been appointed.
Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump was packing the courts, but who was voting for them? So of course, as a segue into what I was talking about with Chris Coons, he voted to confirm over 120 of these Trump judge nominations. He also voted to confirm Alex Azar, Kristen Nielsen. Do you
think that list of judges would have been the same list, though? Because I don't think it would have been the same list. I think we'd have a slightly less conservative appointment of 200 judges. I don't know. I think that we've been given. I mean, obviously the deck has been stacked against us for some time, but I don't think that we would be in the same position that we are now in terms of civil rights. I think that there's a large or a really grave misrepresentation of the way things are going and the way things would have worked. I mean, I agree with you on that, but I don't think that things would be the way they are now, specifically to the point of conservative judge appointments. I don't think that we'd be threatened with a third. He's talking about Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz.
But so it's we're looking at 5.4 million people who have lost, over 5.4 million people who have lost their health insurance because of this pandemic and the layoffs. We're looking at 44% of the population, renting population, facing evictions across the country. What is the groundwork for fascism? What makes that happen? And it's the material conditions of the working class degrading to such a low, horrible level like we are in now. I guess that's the central tenet of liberalism, is that, there are civil rights issues, and identity politics comes into play. Okay, so gay people can get married, and black people are allowed to vote and shit. But what are we doing to actually improve the material conditions of the black working class people. And the DNC is opposed to every goddamn policy that could do that, like Medicare for all, like a $15 an hour minimum wage, like legalizing marijuana, all these things, you know, ending mass incarceration in the private prison system. They are actively fighting against that. So, like, okay, so you're not going to, so you're going to let me be able to vote and be counted as a single person among a sea of people? That's nice, but let's, if I lose my job, if I lose my house, what kind of safety network, social safety net do I have? I've got nothing. So, well, I mean, I'm fortunate and to be privileged to have my parents, but like for the vast majority of working class people, and disproportionately minorities, what's the DNC willing to give them? And it's
Nothing.
nothing.
Yeah, I don't want
I
to.
mean,
I don't mean to sound like I'm a stand for the DNC, but there was literally an opportunity in 2016 when we all could have rallied and prevented fucking Cheeto Mussolini from going into office, and that would have changed a lot of things. I mean, you can't fucking sit there and tell me that it would be the same with Hillary in the office.
I'm not going to
It
blame the
wouldn't.
people who didn't vote for her though, because she was
I'm
not
not blaming the
offering
people
them.
that didn't vote for her. I'm blaming the people that just didn't vote. There are 100,000 people that didn't vote, and
But they weren't
there,
represented.
but there's
Like they've been disenfranchised. They've got
true.
nothing.
She
They're actually, their life is so bad. Their material life conditions are so bad. It's just like, fuck it. Like that, I'm about to die. What does voting have to do with anything?
We cannot be blaming those people when it's the system that allowed a person who won by 3 million votes to not win the presidency. That's why I'm like, you can't blame 100,000 disenfranchised people for a problem that they didn't create. And that's where I'm like, it's my, like, I have to agree with Yejun in that I don't think it would have been that dramatically different. It's like the fact that we even have to discuss it as a debate is proof that it's like a possibility that it wouldn't have been any different. And this is where it's like the system that he's speaking of as a safety net, white conservatives have been made to fear that system under the label of communism. So that system will never happen because of 150 racist ass white people, 150 million racist ass white people that have been conditioned to think that very system that will actually help tons of people who are disenfranchised is communism. So we'll never have that shit here because they're fucking brainwashed. And that's where I'm not positive Hillary Clinton is willing to fight that brainwashing. So that's where I'm like, then those same Hillary Clinton supporters are turning around and blaming disenfranchised people for them not fighting against the fucking electoral college. And that shit pisses me the fuck off.
Well,
and that's
where do those disenfranchised people live for the most part?
It doesn't fucking matter. That's not, the electoral college is not their fault.
No, it's not.
Fucking fault.
If they live in a giant metropolis, then their vote is worth like 1/6 of the vote of the person who lives in Iowa.
Move. A lot of them can't fucking move, and Hillary Clinton wasn't going to help them fucking move. So this is where the gerrymandering comes in, and this is where the lack of social mobility and upward mobility comes in. These people are like basically prisoners, and then they're turning around and getting blamed for shit that's not their fucking fault. And that's where I'm like, this is the classic like team politics that I fucking hate about why the left never gets anything done. They're too busy trying to find people to blame for their impotence, and then they never fucking do anything. This is like Joe Biden. What the fuck is Joe Biden doing right now? All he's doing is talking.
He called the lid at 8:30 a.m. yesterday. Right at, you know, the day after RBG died. Is that not hilarious? He just called the lid. Okay, I'm not doing anything. The country's fucked. I'm expected to be the leader. I'm 8:30 a.m. I'm not gonna. No more press.
Where is his tweet? Joe Biden said, The commander in chief has a sacred duty to those who serve. Trump doesn't understand that. I never will. I mean, I'm
So
not
that was a an advertisement from a
paid by Biden
campaign
Victory
paid.
Fund.
Yeah. So we don't know where that came from. One of the interesting things about that
But it's from his official Twitter account.
is that his official Twitter?
Yeah, it has a little
Okay.
checkbox thing next to it, I think.
Okay. Because I feel like that could just as easily be like a disinformation, part of a disinformation campaign to just have stuff that's labeled as him, but makes him sound like a complete dotard.
Well, I mean, isn't he?
But going back to what Yejun, Chris, what you Tien were talking about in terms of the lack of a capacity for anybody to really get anything done for the betterment of the greater population, including all minorities in this country, and the lack of unity. And going back in terms of the many heads to the Hydra, I think a lot of it is about who can best represent and control and direct resources that support the most powerful corporate interests and power brokers in the nation, and the ones that are able to negotiate the best rates for the people who are the most influential constituents within the districts or the home locations of all of the representation within the House and within the executive. And then the judicial is basically stacked in order to maintain systems that are meant to reinforce either existing or future blueprints for ensuring that wealth is distributed in a particular way. Because if you really think about, if you think about, for instance, the Clinton dynasty, basically they're very well connected from a financial perspective. If you think about the current presidency, very well connected from a financial perspective. There's always been the industrial and military aspect that generates a lot of money and a lot of contracts for typically a very small number of well-connected people. And I think that's been the history that some executive representatives have been warning against in the past, but we seem to have found ourselves in a present that fundamentally ignored those warnings or just treated them as inconsequential, because whatever was going to happen today was going to happen anyway. And if we think about also the $90 million or some odd million dollars that were funneled towards progressive and democratic party causes or representatives or essentially initiatives, within 24 hours of the passing of Justice Ginsburg, I think a lot of people seem to have been spurred by that event in the way that Chris was describing, and didn't necessarily accept the fundamental mortality of a human being and how close Justice Ginsburg was to death within, over the past, even 10 years. I mean, if we look at the average lifespan of a human being, like what were all of these people who all of a sudden decided that they're going to support these causes overnight? What were they doing with their spare money or their, the collective $90 million? Like, where did all that come from? And why is it appearing now as opposed to being directed towards people who were trying to affect the changes that they're so concerned about or prevent the things from happening that they're so concerned about over the course of the justice's life? And then all of a sudden, she passed away, so that means that she can't do anything anymore. But then that also kind of indicates to me that people weren't really aware of what she was capable of doing to begin with, because she's just one person. She's capable of dissenting. She has a lot of influence in the political field and the judicial field, but she's literally, like we said, she's just one person. She's influenced a lot of people. She's been able to get a lot accomplished, and she's been a powerful advocate for equity, for gender rights, gender equality, and these things. However, she can't she can't have been considered the only person capable of achieving these things. And then if we look at who was supported and who the candidates were over the course of her tenure, over the course of her life as a Supreme Court justice, we just see a lot of people who were supporting the industrial complex, regardless of whether or not, and the capitalist complex, regardless of whether or not they were on the left or on the right. So it's really tough to say, oh, just because we lost this advocate and we lost this hero, things are we're going to be able to change things with our money. It's like, well, you have to think about now who's actually in charge of where all of that money goes. You want to be able to follow that paper trail. And I'm not confident that people who are impulsively donating towards these causes are completely aware of where their money is going, especially that volume of money.
Yeah, you guys are saying Hydra, and it's like chopping off a head. And it really is. It's the donor class in general behind it, right? Like, I don't know how to defeat it. I don't like. There's all sorts of
Fire.
issues you can.
You kill it with fire.
Yes, I can. I can identify all sorts of issues that the left has, all the problems. I think one that you pointed out many times, I think, Ian, is the education of people and how, and I think specifically with regards to class consciousness, which I don't know how you get in this goddamn country. Can I curse on here?
We
I'm
drop
sorry.
F-bombs all the
Okay.
time.
Okay.
You can say whatever you want.
This goddamn country, then. I don't know how you get how you educate people on class consciousness and what's going on, because we have no major news network. We don't have MSNBC and Fox and CNN. The left does not have that. We have like a patchwork of podcasts and like
The Young Turks.
YouTube. Yeah. YouTube streaming and whatnot. I don't. That's what we got. So
I think the issue is that whenever there's an example of a person who comes from affluent society taking the time and putting in the effort to understand disenfranchised or groups without resources, they turn them into a Siddhartha, a Buddha type character, a prince who leaves the castle to go live a life of poverty, so that they can gain enlightenment. And so we have it becomes enlightenment tourism. It's not a genuine let's understand and fix these problems. It's, oh look, I can go slum with the other people who are living like at the very limits of their means, and when it gets too rough, I can just go home.
That's a perfect way to describe it too, because even down to the ayahuasca trips that the Joe Rogan.
Oh my god, fuck the ayahuasca motherfuckers. That shit is such bullshit. Like,
I don't know what this is.
Okay, so people will pay money to go on these ayahuasca drug adventures so they can attain enlightenment and gain spiritual balance or some other.
Is that in
bullshit.
South America?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think I have vaguely heard of it then.
People will talk about, like, they'll be like, oh, I remember when I took ayahuasca and I saw the light and all this shit. And it's like, motherfucker, you paid money to go hang out with some poor natives and do drugs.
Yep, that's what they did. And then a lot became very cultish. So it was like this thing that because Joe Rogan was pushing it, it really blew up in America, and it became this thing where people were taking these effectively enlightenment fucking safaris. And that's kind of where, again, it's 100% what Tien was alluding to incarnate. And the fact that a celebrity was kind of endorsing it and pushing it as like a shortcut to enlightenment it was really really gross because then he was selling I mean it still sells it, but it's like nootropics, which the nootropics on their own aren't a bad thing. They're not nearly as like strong as they claim, but when you're trying to sell people brain enhancing drugs and then tell them that they can go get enlightenment quicker by taking this trip down to South America and hanging out with this shaman and taking this drug, it's capitalizing and turning what's meant to be spiritual awareness as a journey into this shortcut that people can then be like, oh yeah, I took my trip and I got enlightened and I saw the light and you know I'm a Buddha now. And it's like it was real gross to watch.
So I take a nootropic. It's called Huperzine A. It's for learning and memory. It is a it's extracted from Chinese club moss, the Huperzia serrata. Um, and the Chinese have been consuming this stuff in a tea form. They dry it up, grind it, brew a tea, and drink it. They've been consuming this for thousands of years. It's been used to treat, well, preemptively treat the early stages of memory loss, dementia, Alzheimer's, and to fairly great effect actually, because they've been using it for thousands of years. And it took, you know, 50 years of American science, Western science, to be like, oh yeah, this might actually work.
Uh, does it work? Do you recommend it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, it's one of those things that whenever I've got to when I have to read a lot of something and have to retain it, I will start taking this, and then by about the end of a week or two, I won't need it, and it's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, I've taken nootropics in the past. I took alpha GPC for a while, and I think they're most of them are cumulative. So
Yeah.
it's like you take it for like 6 months, and you don't necessarily need to take it for another 3 years or something. But I mean, not all of them are like that. But again, I don't have anything negative to say about nootropics at all. It's just a matter of when they come packaged with this type of uh other cultish behavior, it started to get real weird for a while. I mean, it's still weird. You have, obviously Joe Rogan with this Spotify deal trying to do the Howard Stern and move his audience. Like those people, I mean, I don't think they necessarily care. But those people have to feel like sheep when they do that shit. Otherwise, like you can't be alpha dog, fucking independent man of the woods and have your fucking savior move you from platforms. That's the most shit ever.
Man,
And then there's people thinking they're alpha. Hell no, you're not alpha.
Spotify doesn't even pay musicians whose music they generate their billions of dollars from. They don't pay them enough to pay the you know the stagehands. They don't pay them enough to pay the roadies. They don't pay them enough to pay the lowest person on the totem pole of a tour. There's 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 absolutely Spotify is fucking horrible. Like, uh, there's nothing about that platform that makes me want to listen to what they've got, because the entire premise when they launched was, oh, give us access to your music folders and we can share that with the world. And it's like, wait a second. They don't even have this stuff in their own servers. They're using a distributed platform to run off of everyone else's hard drive. Well, I have a Dropbox. I can just share my music with my friends if I feel like it. I can set up an FTP server and share music with my friends if I feel like it. I don't need to pay money for a service so I can access some rando's hard drive. Who the knows what's going on in there?
They just monetize Kazaa and Morpheus. Is what
Exactly.
they
Oh my god, and the worst part is people bought into it. People were like willing to put that crap on their phone or on their computer and then run it religiously and share these links from Spotify. It's like, you know, you can just get that stuff on YouTube, or if you're smart enough, you can, find it on the internet if you don't want to pay for it. Or you can pay for the music of the musician that you like and support their work, because that's really the goal. They make that stuff because they're trying to make a living, not because they want to just like, make everyone happy and feel like a badass for sharing somebody else's stuff.
I think they do need like a real alternative, a usable alternative. Um, I do see
YouTube
people
licenses
want
the
to listen
content.
to like what's that?
YouTube licensed content. Um,
Yeah, but
Apple licenses their content.
you have to have you have to pay for YouTube if you want to use it on mobile. Um,
You do?
yeah, unless like I can listen to it a song on YouTube in my if I play it, but then I'm locked into that screen. Like I can't just go browse other shit while it's happening.
Mm.
Um, so there's YouTube. It's good if you have like a desktop. Usually I listen to music on 50/50 um, between YouTube and Spotify, but there's also like people want to listen to fucking industry bullshit, like mainstream. I mean, I do. Uh, so just like copyrighted, uh, major music label or just regular, medium small indie label, but it's still a capitalist venture at the end of the day. Um, like there's Bandcamp, but I don't like the app's interface so much. I think there's like weird. I don't. I've never had an easy time. I think you have to download it to your phone and take up space. I don't know. I could be talking out my ass on it. I just know I wasn't happy with the.
Yeah,
It would be great
I wasn't
if
happy
there
with
was.
any of those services, so I set up an IceCast server so that I could access my music system at home from wherever I am, and so that I know it's a curated list of music that I've already, approved of, and I might not know the play order because it's randomly generated, but it's the music that I've already selected to listen to.
Yeah, and with like as many music happy nerds are out there, I don't know why they don't like. There's got to be an easy way to make a model where it's open source and malware, spyware free. It doesn't mine your fucking data. Um,
It doesn't
you
turn your
listen
phone
to
into a
yeah,
miner.
you can pay, and then it covers the cost of the servers, and then the rest goes to anyone who works on it or like the artist, like a fair percentage of that cut, and then I don't know why that's not doable in the internet in 2020, but I haven't seen it.
I mean, Mixcloud has a service for DJs where you pay a premium and they cover all the licensing, and you can play whatever you want in your Mixcloud mix, and then they use algorithmic identification to determine whose track is being played during what period of time, how many people are actually listening to it, and then there's like an industry standard, it's like 0.000018 cents for one listener for who listens for, I believe it's like, I think it's like 10 consecutive seconds or something like that, up to a minute. If you listen to a song, if one person listens to a song, the artist gets 0.000018 cents. And so with a platform like Mixcloud, if you have 10,000 people listening to that, what do they make? Like $1.80?
Mm.
I mean, it's not really that much, but that's how much
So
that's how much radio pays. That's how much a performance license and a reproduction license pays. Um, so it's there's a system in place, but it's designed to benefit the platform because of their ability to monetize listeners in terms of ad space, AdSense, um, product placement revenue streams. This message is from our sponsor type shit. Um, the content doesn't benefit the creator so much as it benefits the platform,
and
unfortunately.
then I think what does that say about value in our system? Um, it- I guess we are good musicians, good artists. I think uh
The money's made in touring and in merch.
yeah. Um,
The merch
I
is
think
worth
people
more than the music. That tells me everything I need to know about how broken the system is.
yeah. There's also uh the major labels would never hop on board like a fair independent system, and people want in the end to be able to listen to what's uh in mass culture, um which that's kind of weird too. That's a whole thing, I think. um so I guess like the real like what's valued in the system is just fame. It's not like the actual music or the quality of what it's saying or
Yeah,
how
it's
it
about how
was
much
written, the
attention you can
cleverness.
get.
But it is that it's attention. And you can throw money at it, or if you're a major label and you win. And that harkens to Jessica Skarane's loss. Is like we had so many people, we had uh so much going on. Everybody, a lot of people working on it, and a lot of people doing stuff, and then they just drop like millions of dollars in ads and flyers or whatever, and then we lose. That's what happens. So
Isn't that America though? How much money
yeah.
can you throw at it?
Hmm. And that's why I don't know what's like really doable with the left. Like we can identify all these problems, but what can you actually do that will affect change? Um, is it even possible like conditions of this country could get so bad that there actually is a revolution? I don't know. I think I wonder if people would just like go along with it and just okay. I guess I'm starving to death now. Um,
My
I wonder what those
hypothesis.
conditions would be because we've gotten what's seemingly so bad from what we expected as, I guess in the 90s, maybe. I don't know when we could consider our peak economy, but our standards have gone so low that again, it's like, where is that point where there is an actual cause for revolt for the standards having dropped?
My hypothesis is that people are going, if the issue with mass eviction isn't resolved, people are going to lose their homes and they're not going to be able to either get a job or afford food for themselves or their families. And it's going to take a brief period of time, relatively speaking, but all of the properties that people are evicted from are going to end up being purchased by large corporate interests and then turned into a form of labor-based repayment housing. So I think that that's how people are going to end up resolving the situation if it gets bad enough, because
That's
ultimately it's
terrifying.
about how to spend money on things.
That's just terrifying. Uh, I mean,
there was
the banks
oh
already own most of the housing at this point. I mean, unless someone's mortgage is completely paid off, the bank still owns the property.
Right. And even if somebody's a landlord, or if they've you know purchased they've taken out a loan in order to expand the residence capacity on their property for some kind of Airbnb type situation, if they're not going to be able to afford those payments, then essentially they lose that property, and then they'll have to deal with the repercussions of the expansion, renovation, et cetera, and perhaps even lose their own property. So it's entirely possible that a either financial based corporation or a residence based corporation, or some combination of the two, is going to develop and step in and offer to um, purchase the homes from, or the debt essentially from the private residents and the landlords, and then we'll have, entire swaths of suburb or neighborhood or parts of the country that are not just owned by banks or developers or things like that, but by actual private corporations. And then they're going to be able to determine the terms by which people are able to live there. And it's going to be a whole other form of categorization of residency requirements.
There was a town. It was kind of like, oh, here it is, Company Town. I don't know if you know about it, but is a place where practically all stores and housing are owned by one company, and that is also the main employer. It's a model village. Uh,
Oh yeah,
and
Ford
also,
tried to do that in Brazil once. It failed historically.
yeah. Why did it fail?
It failed in Brazil because they had no concept for the quality of humidity and the impact that would have on the materials that they brought down to build the buildings, or the kind of cooling or HVAC system they would need in the buildings for the workers. The roads were so terrible that it just destroyed all, like the tires on their trucks. So their export uh, their distribution model was flawed. The whole thing was flawed. I think there's like it's like a skeleton town. Let me see.
I mean, in addition to that kind of model, I see the need for people.
Fordlandia.
Yeah.
It's a Brazil rainforest.
So there's going to be a need for people to be able to go into even more debt, is what I'm seeing, beyond the debt that they're already in once it's purchased by a privatized corporation. So I think that these corporations that are going to end up owning the land and the housing across large areas are going to establish their own banks that provide very specialized rates for people who have absolutely nothing, and basically keep them as indentured labor within their system, so that they have a corporately issued credit or debit card with its own specific types of fees that are meant to incrementally pay off the debt at particular rates that are, of course, impossible to get out of. And then you have families that can't really escape the cycle because that's where they live and they're too poor to move anyway.
You know, that sounds like the factory towns in China.
Exactly.
It's just with different
Is
names.
that what's happening next? Is that the next stage of our
Oh yeah.
country?
Well, within the next 40 years, the deep south will become uninhabitable. The Mississippi Delta all the way up to Missouri is going to be, hell swamp. Um, there's going to be this condition where it's so humid that in significant portions of the South, that insect populations will just completely take over. You won't be able to go outside because you'll be eaten alive by mosquitoes. They'll like drain your blood sufficiently that you'll pass out, and then they'll really drain your blood. Not to mention that these are places where they expect uh, the average temperature to be 95 degrees or above for more than a month a year, which apparently is the threshold. I mean, it's Arizona's not that hot compared to this. Arizona's fucking hot. I've been to Arizona. New Mexico is not as hot as this, and that's a really hot place too in the peak of summer. I went to New Mexico one time for the summer solstice, and man, it was like peak sunlight for 4 or 5 hours. But I didn't die. I wouldn't want to live there either. But that's what it's going to be
Basically,
like. It's going to get bad. It's going to get worse actually, because this heating system, the situation, it encourages like
heating system,
yeah, system situation.
Earth back.
Oh man, it kind of
Heck.
encourages what is it? Wildfires, which which dump like just inordinate amounts of carbon into the atmosphere, which perpetuate the cycle of continued global warming. Let's not call it climate change anymore, because it's actually global warming, and it always has been. And we tried to be, polite and be like, oh, it's climate change.
But
But
what about That 1 year when it cooled down.
Yeah, exactly. That's the dilemma. Yeah, it is climate change, but on average, it's global warming. And I think it's been over a decade almost that the carbon levels in the atmosphere have been over 400 parts per million, and that was like average carbon levels during the beginning of pretty much every mass extinction that has involved volcanoes. And we don't have active volcanoes like we used to, but we've got cars, and that might as well be an active volcano. Oh, so incidentally, speaking of cars and petrochemicals and all that good stuff, there are some, thousands of ships just kind of floating around, like just chilling, just waiting to be docked and have their oil pumped out of their tanks, but they can't do it because nobody wants that oil. Like, let me see if I can find it. I'll share it in the thing. Okay. So just around North America, South America, and Africa, in this picture that I'm about to share in the Facebook, there is more little red dots which represent the oil tankers than I can count, and it's quite impressive actually. It's also really kind of terrifying to think that there's all this oil that can't be it just can't be accessed. No one's able to move it. It's just there.
Hmm.
And if it's not being removed from the tankers, then what's going on with it? Are they still pumping oil? We can't just subsidize an oil industry when we've got all this surplus. Can we? I mean, how long? Oh, here we go.
It's a big scam, big ass scam. I'm calling it now. All this oil is a big ass scam that we never had to go down this path because, man, we've spent so much time as a species dependent on oil that we didn't need to unnecessarily and arbitrarily. Like, obviously, this is not, I'm not saying it's like Illuminati type shit, but it's one of these things where we should feel as if humanity got scammed into oil dependence because we never had to do this shit. It's not something we need to get stuck on and we need to stay stuck on. We never should have been dependent on in the fucking first place. And it's like one of these things that it's crazy how much deconditioning and or unconditioning. I don't even know what the proper term would be in terms of when you're conditioned one way. It's not because sometimes it's reconditioning, sometimes it's unconditioning, sometimes it's deconditioning because people have different levels of conditioning. Because then it's like some people can only change their patterns if they're reconditioned. And not to get too hung up on that, this is where we have been so conditioned into a certain mindset that sometimes LSD was the only way for people to unlearn things. And someone in the comment section, Ian brought up Terrence McKenna and how we can blame a lot of the culture on him. And he was definitely one of the more influential LSD heads that shifted, the whole 2012 bullshit that was based on his birthday and or December 21st. Like, he was super narcissistic fuck that had way too much influence at the end of the day. And like him and Timothy Leary, and there were some other fucking acid heads that ended up having way too much influence. So we have all these people who distracted the culture and then tried to turn around and be like, oh, this is reconditioning or deconditioning, and they were just props of the fucking government. So then it becomes this whole thing of like, you look at all these acid heads and all these hippies that didn't do shit. They just became the man. It's because that's what they were always intended to become through that path. That path through the hippie shit was just reconditioning for those people to then think that they were rebellious and their entire path was a fucking trap in the first place. So this is why, having gone through the rave scene and stayed away from the drugs for the most part, I saw that shit become the same type of path where you have all these people who were ravers thinking that they were fighting the man, just getting high. And that's where I'm like, you have to be honest with yourself. Like, if you enjoy getting high, fucking great, have at it. But don't do drugs and think you're somehow fighting against the man by just getting high. That's not how that shit works. But because the way these scenes are created and the way that they're meant to sort of become these snake eating the tail paths to nowhere, they're not actually meant for paths to rebellion because they're like very much CIA influenced. So this is kind of where I'm like looking at it now as a man who's been a rebellious teenager, almost swayed by these cultures, but aware enough to like not get heavily involved in the drug aspect to keep my mind clear from it. It was interesting to see how much people deluded themselves into thinking that getting high is fighting. And that's kind of where, again, like looking at these hippies and fucking Terrence McKenna. Yeah, Terrence McKenna fucked a bunch of people up. Him specifically.
I mean,
And-
also, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and if you think about it, they want you to get high. Like when you're a kid and you think, oh, yeah, it's illegal to get high. Fuck them. I'm gonna be rebellious and get high, smoke weed. Everything's cool. But people will. It's illegal, yes, and not because they disapprove of it, but pot is illegal because they want to be able to arrest you and put you in prison, make a shit ton of money off of like prison labor and shit like that, and to disenfranchise, swaths of population when a lot of people just smoke pot and chill. It's just an easy way to make a shit ton of money. So it's kind of ironic, I think, that that can be seen as a rebellious act when it's an easy way to reinforce, the powers that be.
How many hippies or ravers or anyone from counterculture who said "fuck the man"? I wonder how many of them actually ended up becoming the man. Because I bet it's actually a lot. Like a lot
A
more.
lot of them.
A lot more than
of
people
them from
realize.
from the flower generation. A lot of them ended up just working desk jobs, becoming CEOs, all of that. Yeah.
I do think like the percentage of the population that were hippies was relatively small because like there were a lot of people, there were people fighting against the system during that time, but there were a lot of conservative people from that time too, around the same generation, and they were dubbed as like something like the me generation, or they were just known for being very selfish. And naturally, that would come about after great prosperity that follows the Great Depression. So I think there's that on some level, is maybe there weren't that many of them to begin with, or not as many as we thought. It's just by media exposure, we think that there's that many people. There's definitely a lot that sold out too, I'm sure.
Well, that's even more insidious. The fact that is counted as a rebellion that should be propagated in terms of a highly impactful cultural event that represents the true grassroots movement of a counterculture, when in fact it's actually a much smaller impact culturally than it's being shown to be, and it's actually producing less of an impact or a sway within the larger cultural and collective consciousness. It just goes to show how the media has been involved in warping the portrayals of cultural events and movements for quite some time.
Yeah, I think the same happened with the ravers too. Like, if you think about like the percentage of the population that were ravers versus the rest of them, um, in the 90s.
It only seems like there are a bunch of ravers because everyone a raver knows is another raver.
Yeah, but I don't think that many people were ravers. It was like a very niche subculture,
Oh yeah,
and then um, very yeah, it was very specific segment of the population.
like
Um,
I think it's like point. Man, I want to say that I could. When we were going to IU, I feel like maybe there was like 100 ravers on campus for all 30,000 IU students. Maybe like real ravers that actually like were all about the lifestyle,
mm-mm.
not just people who went to parties to get drugs and you know feed their girlfriend ecstasy so they could do things that they wouldn't normally be allowed to do.
I just wanted to dance. I
Yeah,
can't
I
lie.
wanted
It
to
was
hang.
fun.
I wanted to hang out in front of a giant like 100,000 watt PA and
Yeah.
vibrate and listen to music at audio levels that I couldn't facilitate at home.
Like literally shaking your body
Yeah,
and like just jamming out. Ah, that was fun.
Yeah, I
And
can dig that. I think once, if there's ever a period of time when a public performance of some kind um, is safe and allowed and facilitated, I think I'd want to go to a place where there's like massive bass, like
uh-huh.
electronic music, and just, be there and just kind of like resonate with the whole situation.
Craziest shit about it is the only reason I ever learned how to write music is because of raves. Going to raves and hearing drum and bass music and wanting to reconstruct it is the only reason I ever learned how to write music. Cause like I would hear these sounds and melodies and try to be like, what the fuck? What how many parts? Cause I knew how to play piano and I knew how to play saxophone before raves happened. But once I heard drum and bass for the first time, I was like, I want to make that, but learning what it was constructed from was something I had to do first. And the only reason I ever learned how to write music, like I said, is because of raves. And then on top of that, the the process of learning what it takes to actually make one of those tracks, then you learn and appreciate the people's time that they put into it in the first place. So then, like, I never had to take drugs to appreciate that music because it got me so interested in it sonically that I was like, okay, I'm going to get emotionally invested in this art. And doing that led me to this place where it's insane, because the scene was relatively small. I got to meet all my fucking heroes because if you like appreciated the music, these people were so approachable that you could just walk up to them and talk to them. Like pretty much any like high level producer in the rave scene from like the 2000s to the like early teens, like I've probably met them because they were so approachable. And some people may have never heard of them, and then some people have probably heard their music in commercials and don't even fucking know it. And there's all these things, but this not to I didn't say any names because I'm not trying to name drop, yet I digress. The whole thing is there was this element of having a family scene that the real ravers were about, that like even the highest level of producers in that scene kept, so they weren't these assholes that like, oh, you get to the top and like what's that dude's name, dead mouse. Dead mouse is not one of these people. Like Skrillex is one of these people, and this is kind of where when you start to see the difference in how these people interact with quote unquote their fans, there's this level of like the whole okay. So the whole reason I'll say Skrillex is because this dude is so fucking nice that like the dude is so nice. Whenever I would see the hate that he would get on the internet before learning how nice he was, it was like funny. But then after seeing this person's actual niceness is like, oh shit, this is completely not only unwarranted, this shit needs to go somewhere else. Like it's like one of those types of things. Like I wasn't even necessarily a fan of his music all that much, of Bro Step or of his influence, but seeing how nice this dude was to other human beings when he didn't have to be, when other people are in that same situation and they're just straight up dicks. That's why I was like, oh, this is a whole different level of human being that did not let fame, not only it didn't let, he didn't let it pollute him, he leveraged it to be a nicer human being. And that's where I'm like,
He actually composes really beautiful music.
oh yeah, for sure.
Like incredibly complex, sonically rich music that modulates in keys and has themes. Like we're talking about like real, like if we were just to analyze it, just like structurally, it has more in common with like classical music and jazz than underground electronic music.
Yeah,
And
he's amazing in
he's
that.
actually
Like, he,
quite incredible.
but although it isn't my thing either,
Yeah, I'm
kind
not
of
into
going along
bro
with
step
Chris.
either,
Like,
but you know, like
I'm a
I can
techno
be
guy.
objective
But
about it. Like it has it's all there.
mhm.
It's real music. And then I think that's the dilemma is that at a point like underground electronic music either becomes commercialized and, you know, start becomes pop music or it becomes this curated niche that you really only experience in what amounts to a audio museum. And it might be new, but it harkens back to a style that was created. I mean, yeah, how old is techno at this point? How old is house music? How old is disco? How old is dub music? Because dub music is like ancient at this point, and people are still making new dub music, but it still sounds like it did. It just sounds cleaner because we have fancier technology and we have computers. But essentially, the music is the same. So that to me is like it's verging on folk electronic music.
uh, I think there's something to be said with what Chris was saying about how you could meet your heroes, and I think that's how it was and was supposed to be. Like DJs were just other people that happened to be in the crowd. They had like they weren't elevated to beyond like into a superstar.
Well, there was superstar DJ Kyoki, but he was kind of a joke.
Yeah, I mean there were, and I mean like Knuckles and just everyone like
And
Derek
Frankie
May
Knuckles
or
became a
something.
bootlicker.
Yeah,
Oki was a
but
nice person, and like when because he would go to shows and hang out with people, and then that's when you'd be like, oh, this dude sucks as a DJ, but he's nice, so you couldn't hate on him.
Yeah, it's
Weird place.
yeah.
there's they're just famous people, yeah, but I think like generally speaking, if you were going to raves during that time, most of the DJs were like regular people. They might have brought you might have gone to see a headliner like a big name or something every once in a while, but it
But nobody actually knew what they looked like, and it didn't matter.
yeah, that too.
That was the other thing. Like, I think the reason that we saw like the superstar DJ, the rock star DJ emerge, was because the industry itself couldn't sell something that didn't have an image, something that was basically a silhouette shadow with lasers and lights and fog moving around it. So they had to start showing people what DJs looked like, but nobody really. And that shouldn't matter. It's supposed to be about the music and the way it sounds. And so there's this disconnect about electronic music performance and production and how what it actually looks like when somebody's making electronic music because not everyone's making Tangerine Dream or Vangelis. They're not sitting there surrounded by in a booth of synthesizers. And that stuff doesn't even sound that great. I mean, let's be really, really fucking honest about it. You can listen to that stuff in your living room because it's composed and you're listening to a score. You're listening to a recorded orchestration. But when that stuff is done live, they have to leave out so much because they can't do it, even with the number of sequencers that are used, and the number of processors and synthesizers. It's just at a point it doesn't translate the same way because so much of that stuff exists in a studio on a tracker, on a DAW, on a cassette reel, even on a sequencer. But there's so much going on that when it's being done live, you just can't, because you need like four other sets of arms to turn all the other knobs on all the other synthesizers simultaneously, because not everyone's going to be able to program or automate their DAW or whatever to do the thing the right way. Or it's like a fully programmed tracker that nobody actually has to do any input on because it's completely through composed. And so you press a button, someone's like, "Oh, they're not doing anything; they're just pressing buttons." And the reality is that all the thought goes in before the buttons get pressed. So they have to put a face on it. They have to give it a performance. They have to give it a show. That's why, uh, what's his name, Cake Boy, the guy who throws cake and sprays the crowd with champagne. That's why that guy came into existence. That's why, you know, I know some DJs who wear masks, and that stuff's great. But when the mask becomes like more than the identity, like when like fans start wearing the mask, like like it's their mask now, or when the stage show becomes more important than the music, then we're looking at performances that aren't actually musical performances. They are stage performances.
And I think in that there's definitely that aspect to it when you wear a mask, because part of it is when I'm DJing and I wear a mask, I want people to focus on the music and not my face, but
Yeah.
the mask is part of bringing that experience to them, because then if I can't do something that gives them a higher level experience than just listening to it at home on their speakers, then in their heads they should just listen to it at home on their speakers. So that's why you have to like step it up a level and have, I don't have the lasers and shit yet, but it's one of those things why, you have, if people have eyes, obviously I don't want to be ableist. It's more so in that if your audience is there for a sonic experience, but they also have eyes, if you don't please their eyes, you're doing them a disservice. And that's where, or even down to like, it doesn't have to necessarily be tactile, but when you're talking about the dude throwing cake at people, it gives them more sensory experience because they're physically there. And if you don't actually take use of that as an artist, you're kind of leaving your audience
So
left.
I went to an Avicii event once, and it was actually incredible. It was like a sea of 5,000 college girls all jumping up and down in kind of in step. At one point, it was a giant wave of white T-shirts holding these white glow stick looking foam tube things that had pulsing LEDs in them, and they were all shaking them in sequence, or not in sequence, in sync with each other. They were all. It was incredible. I've never seen anything like that before or since. It was definitely not a rave. It was like the op. It was as close to a church moment as I can imagine for electronic music. I'm not gonna lie, it was incredible. That to me is what you're talking about. That's audience engagement. But I don't think, and that's a tactile thing. They're all holding on to these glow stick things that they were passing out, or they may have been selling. I don't know. I don't usually get that kind of stuff. I'm not into that.
And they're synchronizing with like 50,000 or 5,000 other people, however many it was.
I'm
And
gonna
it's
say
like,
there's only 5,000, but there may have been 10,000.
There's a recorded talk slash performance by Talvin Singh where there's like 25 people sitting in a presentation hall, probably in a school or a community college or a library, and all he has is a tabla and a MacBook. And what he ended up putting together was really, really impressive and also really like captivating. And I feel like one of the things he did was he tuned the tabla in front of them, in front of the audience. And I feel like that provided like a focal point or like partially tactile experience for people to really start to identify with the tool that he was using. But then once he started creating a track extemporaneously after explaining all of the different sounds that a tabla could make. That was a pretty impressive performance, and it's a really really low key engagement. He's just sitting on a cushion on an elevated spot on a stage, and he's like wearing a cardigan. And it's like super chill.
Without trying coming out saying, this old guy, trying not to come off as too old guy, but like back in the day, you didn't need a show. I don't think because people were busy dancing. Um, it was enough to have just a huge sound. Lights are cool, um, but like you didn't need like a Daft Punk spaceship. You didn't need that. It just
You didn't
Well,
need
the
Dead
music
Mouse's
was big,
cube.
and then you danced.
because they were under threat of being shut down by police. So it's not like if the police weren't potentially being called, I feel like those things would have eventually evolved to those. Because I remember going,
That's true.
I think it was,
that was a real thing.
and like it was out in the middle of nowhere, so they had a life size UFO. They had all kinds of fucking. I think they had gigantic fake mushrooms. It was like UV or ultraviolet lights, and like it was kind of like Alice in Wonderland inside of a warehouse. So there's definitely they went well beyond what you could do in just a regular warehouse, considering it was one of the few that I saw that did that, in that they kind of made a pop-up theme park that was also, obviously there's no rides, but it was also geared towards the show. So in the theme of Planet Nine from outer space, again, when you're in the rave and there's all this fucking music going and you walk out and there's a gigantic UFO, it like takes the thing to another level where, again, every show wasn't like that, but that's why that one stands out as a memory above all the other ones, in the sense of, I mean, again, not that the other ones weren't great, when they take it to this other level and do it correct. Because, sometimes you can add shit and it doesn't actually make the experience any better. But because they made it a theme and it all worked together, the entire space transcended what a normal rave became, because it was like you're on another fucking planet at that point.
Mm.
I went to a
That's
Plan
right.
9 party once. It got shut down.
Uh,
No, I think, well, Talvin Singh is an interesting example because he was part of a group called Tabla Beat Science back in like the end of the 90s. And that was a band. And he didn't even play the tablas in that group. He's a synthesist. And then he had several albums that came out like towards the end of the 90s, and they were all like pretty hardcore electronic music. Like holy shit, like one of them actually still sounds like it's from the future, like still to this day 20 years later. And so when I think about what he's doing, that guy was already so far ahead of the curve that he could probably, if he had a computer and a microphone, he could probably make that kind of music with, a glass jar and a chopstick and a metal measuring tape and some toothpicks. Like I don't think that there's anything that would stop someone like that from making really complex sounding music. It's the same thing with like Iman Tobin. That guy can take the sound of a door opening and turn that into the nastiest bass sound you've ever heard.
yeah, his Foley Room album is legendary.
Yeah, it's like that's some mind blowing sound design. So I think that there's like a difference between um, experimental electronic musicians who make something that sounds like drum and bass and underground drum and bass and studio drum and bass. And when I say underground, I mean like, made in someone's bedroom or their basement, um, made on the spot because they've got a sampler and a computer, and they might not even have real speakers. They might be using like some, you know, bookshelf speakers that sound terrible. But what they make is amazing because they put some thought and some creativity into it. I think that the dilemma though is that that's not marketable. No matter what you do, like you can't sell out an entire arena with a guy sitting on some cushions surrounded by some tablas with a laptop. You've got to put him on a stand and you got to put some lights around him and you got to spray shit at the audience and they might have to wear makeup. It's got to be marketable. It's all in the marketing at that point. Of course, I'm not like, you know, the be all end all decision maker of what is good music. There's a lot of music out there that I just don't get, and some that I hear and I don't want to get. But someone out there likes it, and I think that's part of what makes the marketing the key. They figured out their audience. They know how to get their audience's attention. They know how to influence the decision making process of the audience and let them know that, hey, this is here. You should come spend your money. There's a new ish documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma that discusses algorithmic influence and how it is changing the way people interact because now we're not just making decisions based upon information. Our decisions are made based upon information that was selected for us through an algorithm to increase our activity and participation within the network so that they can create a more accurate profile and market things to us. And I may have missed a few things. It's also got a really kind of bullshit
I'll take
fake
this.
family, but yeah, go
I
ahead.
was gonna Randos before for things the Randos have talked about before for 500.
Yeah, no shit. um, so Netflix has, I'm sure those motherfuckers are watching or listening at some point. They said, "Hey, this is a good idea. Let's do a show," because that's just how I want to think about it. But you know, we're at this really we're at this really critical junction with technology where it can do amazing things, but the amazing things that can be done with it aren't really being done because there are too many interests who are making money off of it, and they know that hey, if we do these things, we can make more money.
Well,
And
it's like the monetization of clicks.
yeah,
But if they don't do it, then someone else will too. There's that, like the tragedy of the commons uh,
yeah,
dilemma. Um,
I think that's that. I think that was the promise that blockchain was supposed to change those things by allowing or by creating a a record of who's actually involved and what goes on, and that way we can be smart about it. But I think even all of that whole technology itself got kind of taken over by the same kind of interest that it sought to get away from and to undo.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that's where obviously nothing is immune from being corrupted, even something that's supposedly uncorruptible like blockchain. And that's kind of where, um, you know, RIP Occupy Wall Street. Remember Occupy Wall Street and all
Oh,
that hope they had that year, that brief, or it wasn't even a year. It was probably like 3 months before they got co-opted. Because I was on those fucking.
I thought they had to shut down because winter happened and it got too cold to be camping
That's
out in front of the financial district.
that's part of it. But what happened was on their chat boards, the CIA infiltrated their shit and started running uh, mm, fucking what's it called, COINTEL, and was basically it split the Occupy movement. I watched that shit go down, and that's where I was like, "Oh, this COINTEL shit is real, man." Because they would there would be people coming in calling for attacks on shit that were clearly just trying to bait people into attacking shit that was a fucking honeypot. And I remember the day that I knew for sure when they were like, attack the New York Stock Exchange at noon and blah, blah, blah. And it was like the New York Stock Exchange's website and not the actual exchange servers. And that's why I was like, oh, these are the motherfucking CIA in this chat. This is not a real hack. Any fucking hacker worth of shit would know that attacking the stock exchange's actual website won't do fucking anything to halt trading. That won't do shit. And that's where I was like, oh, this is a fucking honeypot in this bitch. So it was, again, watching Occupy Wall Street get co-opted from the inside during those winter months and then try to have them resurge with the co-opted organization to try to recruit people and entrap them to fucking be like, oh, you were going to join up and Occupy because we have control of the organization. We're going to throw you in jail. It's the same shit they're trying to do with quote unquote Antifa and Black Lives Matter right now. And that's where I'm like, you know, I support the concept of Black Lives Matter, but that shit has been infiltrated by the fucking CIA already. I ain't stupid. These motherfuckers infiltrate. Like, man, I can tell you, I have seen a motherfucker in person at one. My parents do community meetings, and every when it's like one Wednesday every month they'll do Black business promotion. And one of these meetings, they had somebody in there that every time somebody brought up a point, this person would just have some sort of counterpoint that they thought was like important to bring up, and it would just derail.
Yeah.
Every fucking time. And I was sitting there watching this shit happen, and I talked to my dad after. I was like, Dad, was that lady weird to you? He's like, yeah, that lady was weird as shit. I mean, he didn't. But we got into a discussion about it. I'm like, man, I feel like that was a fucking agent that was planted. He's like, son, you know, this is not the first time that's happened. And I'm glad you pointed it out, because I had the same exact thought. And we talked about it for a while. And my dad, you know, he has some crazy conspiracies, but for the most part, he's very rational about stuff because he understands the level of coordination. Because if it's like, if my dad brings a conspiracy theory to me and I can debunk it, he's not going to keep holding that mindset. And this is where, having seen that shit in person, knowing the type of shit these motherfuckers been pulling on the Black community for a long time, when I saw that shit in person, that's where I was like, whoa, these motherfuckers have eyes everywhere trying to undermine shit. Even the moment somebody has even the concept of something revolutionary, there's somebody there watching to just stamp that idea and sow negative thoughts of doubt and just make them double think and think twice about doing some shit that might make a change. That person is there every fucking community meeting. They are Black too. They have gotten good at hiding these people. They're Black. But what you don't realize is a lot of these people are not capital B Black in the sense of that's not their identity. They don't identify as Black because in their head, race doesn't matter. They've been conditioned to this bullshit. Like, I don't personally believe race exists scientifically, but the construct fucking exists. These people have been conditioned to think that they're living outside that construct. So if they go in these meetings and undermine these Black activists that are really trying to upset the American way, quote unquote, they're serving the justice. They're serving this higher equality that doesn't, they don't see race. They just see people trying to disrupt the American way. And these lowercase Black people have been fucking conditioned to believe that bullshit, because while scientifically race is fucking bullshit, obviously, you gotta understand we live in this paradigm of white supremacists who have conditioned us and infested every point of our culture with this paradigm. So the only way that we can actually get out of it is to deconstruct every single polluted part of our fucking culture that has that patriarchal racist bullshit in it. And these lowercase Black people, these fucking plantation Black people, these house Black people are the ones that are keeping uppercase Black people stuck on the plantation, stuck waiting for a fucking vote to get my goddamn freedom. I ain't waiting for no fucking vote to get my freedom. People need to understand that. I ain't waiting for fucking November to get my goddamn freedom as an uppercase black person, and I ain't about to let no lowercase black person derail my shit either. People need to understand that.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for that guy, but also think there are so many people in bad situations, like, or just somebody serving out a life sentence. That I do think a lot of the counterintelligence type, those ops people come in who infiltrate. I think they do use like prisoners or people who are hard up, and it's hard to tell like who's intentionally disruptive and then who's just kind of dumb, because there's both are effective. Like it's effective to have somebody who's loudmouth and dumb. Look, in that kind of situation.
Check it, Ye June. If I was a fucking slave and I was planning to escape my goddamn plantation, them would be the motherfuckers that would go tell Massa, hey, Chris is planning to revolt. He got a bunch of other than them slaves. They plan to revolt. They was gonna come kill you, Massa. Those the same motherfuckers. Because guess what? All black people, we're in a shitty situation right now. If you get stuck in jail, if you go to prison, that sucks. But that don't give you fucking license to sell out black people.
No. I'm not excusing them by any means.
And I'm condemning them. I'm saying these Judas ass motherfuckers are the reason black people can't get ahead, because they're the ones that fucking undermine our goddamn revolts. They're the first ones to undermine our shit.
Right on. I like the laugh track and the applause. That was cool. Yeah, it's righteous. I also think I do think that, going back to what you said about Occupy, now like the left is just continually destined to lose. Like, we love to lose. That's our thing. That's our favorite pastime, is to lose over and over again. I never think it's without some sort of effect. It never achieves its sought out intentions, but it also has unintended consequences, like Seattle with the back in the 90s, those protests had an effect. I'm not sure that Occupy could have happened without that. And I'm not sure 2016 Bernie could have happened without that, which is, I know it seems like milk toast, kind of like weak, because I mean, he lost, and it was just a single office, presidential office. But I think it did awaken like all the people who worked on the campaign for Bernie in 2016 continued to work on it. Like it gave people an opportunity to be an active leftist, as opposed to times when there was less opportunity to do something. And then I do think it's continuing and expanding. I think there are more people doing things now than there was in the past. Maybe it's just an effect of things being so bad, but also I don't think you can discount the effect of okay, now the squad started in 2018 and now it's expanded by a couple members. Sure, electoralism is probably not going to change anything, but within these areas that they were elected, there are like hundreds and hundreds of people who are connected and willing to do things. And like outside of campaign work, there is a shit ton of stuff that you can do. You can do mutual aid and community organizing, which I'm still vague on what that actually consists of. But there is like there's more opportunity to create um, leftist projects and actually see them through uh, to an effect on a local level, because these things were laid some groundwork of you know um, putting it in the public eye. We wouldn't have like I've always believed in universal healthcare, and that conversation didn't exist until 2016, like at all. Like people never, it wasn't in even a possibility, and now it's not a possibility, but there's still people know about it.
Here's the thing. It is a possibility. We just have to stop waiting for the fucking government to do it, bro. This is where, like, waiting on the government to do shit is this weird psychological loop that they put us in to then take away our capacity to do shit for ourselves. Because it's like Andrew Yang did a fucking UBI experiment where he took his own money and gave these people a UBI to see how it affected their lives and did an experiment. All the rich, I mean, not all of them, it would just take a small number of wealthy people to get together to create a universal healthcare starter that then snowballed into an actual universal healthcare or UBI program that was privately funded. These motherfuckers just got us constantly waiting as if we can't coordinate and organize to do that shit on our own. We don't have to fucking wait. We don't have to wait, man. And that's the craziest shit. Like, the whole reason I say this shit like that is because years ago, I stopped waiting for fucking people to start doing the ideas that I thought would help change things. And I started finding like-minded people and gathering funds and getting people and teams together. Some of them are successful, some of them, a lot of them failed. But what I learned is that you don't have to fucking wait. And in the process, when you find like-minded people and you have a good idea and you have a good cause, the capital will start to flow in, and then change starts to happen. And then you start forcing the government to respond with change. Because what I learned is that we can, as people, strong arm the government into moving by just doing shit ourselves. If we can show this shit is possible, then they have no fucking excuse not to do it. We did that shit in Ghana. We did that shit in Mauritius. We did that shit in Nigeria. We did that shit in Kenya. We went to all these countries. We did that shit in India. We showed the government, hey, this is possible. You have no fucking excuse not to do this. And guess what? When the people know and the government is forced to confront that, they can't do shit about it. The only problem is in America, our people are so dumb and so fucking uneducated. They don't even know what's possible. Our people are fucking mentally in like 1985 with what they think is possible technologically. Even though they're walking around with super fucking computers in their pocket, they don't even know what these things are, man. It's crazy. So this is why when I'm saying you got people arguing over mail-in vote, motherfucker, you got a supercomputer in your pocket that can securely encrypt your fucking vote so we can vote every fucking week about initiatives that are going on in our local community and about the national election. Fuck the post office. The post office should be hosting the servers to secure the encrypted messages. Fuck.
Hey, yeah.
I'm saying our Americans are so fucking stupid. They're arguing over paper when we could be having post offices converted into server houses. Our post office should be at least housing email for every American should have a U.S. post office email address that's protected and housed in a local server in their fucking neighborhood. So if they need to access it, they can get NFC and go access it. If their local internet goes out for their cell phone, then they could go to the post office, which has a backup generator and a backup system that goes to the fucking satellite network that never goes down. There's zero downtime. That shit can happen, but people are too fucking wrapped up in these low-level dumbass conversations that they're talking about fucking 500-year-old technology. Yeah, guess what? I can fucking train a pigeon to get my vote in before this fucking election if we needed to. I have a fucking homing pigeon take that shit all the way to goddamn place it needs to, if need be, before November 3rd. You talking about mail-in votes? Let's talk about some actual advancement in the way we vote. These motherfuckers are so regressive in their thought because they're trying to argue with the right wing, and this is why I'm trying to call them out to be like, hey, your fucking mind is in the mud, y'all. Your mind is so stuck in the mud because these mouth-breathing, regressive-ass, right-wing, patriarchal fucking pieces of shit bring the conversation so far down. We're not even talking about modernity, let alone the future. We're talking about 1955 fucking 1500s technology, man. So this is what I'm saying. Like, we don't need to wait. We don't need to wait for these old ass motherfuckers to do shit because they ain't gonna do shit anyway. They're just gonna do something to try to keep us dependent. So this is what I'm saying.
In one sense, yes, fully agree. But in another sense, so why I got involved this round in politics. So I'll just give a quick history of my politics. Is like I voted for Obama in 2008. 2010, I think I voted. 2012, I did not, and I switched to independent because at that point it was clear that shit's not really gonna. I don't think it matters. I don't know if anything matters, and so I kept.
It only matters
I
if
voted
you have a
in
lot of money.
Yeah, I voted in 2016 because, well, what Hillary versus Trump. Okay, let's try and do something, I guess. This election cycle rolled around. It did seem like shortly before that I was doing or trying to get involved in climate activism, but there's not enough awareness and momentum for doing anything about it. And this year rolled around, so I'm like, oh, maybe I can hope to do something and help elect like Green New Deal people, which doesn't go far enough, but at least it's something. And so going into now, like a lot of what I am concerned for in politics has to do are very like specific issues based right now. I don't know. I think I just like concrete shit. So now after the loss of Jess, but so the last interview thing with T and I was talking a lot about Chris Coons and how he sucks and the things that we're trying to pass. A lot of those platform pieces are like doable on a state level in some form, maybe not like balls out, but like so $15 minimum wage, that would be great to have. I don't know how you can do that without government. I like the idea of you can't have Medicare for all here, but like a Medicaid buy-in option, a public option that is actually affordable, and maybe that could be good. You can still pass that on the state level, legalizing marijuana. So these kinds of issues that I don't know how to do that without the government.
I mean, I don't know if the federal government is necessary. And on top of that, I don't know if the federal government actually helps those things because then we have a lot of people who are doing incorrect math, then try to propose these things that don't work out mathematically. So like everywhere shouldn't necessarily have a $15 minimum wage. It should be living wage. That should be the thing we're even talking about. It shouldn't be minimum wage. It should be living wage first off.
Yeah.
Minimum wage should be higher than a living wage.
Right, exactly. And then on top of that, if everywhere had a localized living wage that was the local standard, it wouldn't matter what the federal government says because everybody would be getting paid a living wage. That's the thing we should be looking for because in Indiana, the living wage may actually be like $12 an hour, not 15.
I think it's like 16 something.
Yeah. So again, it's like, I don't know off the top, like if Tien says 16, he knows better than me off the top of his head. My thing is some places are going to be $30 living wage. So if these people are proposing a $15 minimum wage, there's still people who are going to be under the living wage in these areas because they're just proposing a fucking arbitrary number. And that's why it's shit like that. When you talk about like when Bernie proposed Medicare for all and like didn't do the math, that shit pissed me the fuck off because the numbers or the lack of numbers and his proposals didn't work out mathematically. So then he makes the shit look dumb. And then when Andrew Yang proposes these things without being brave enough to talk about the nationalization of industries that need to happen to support UBI, then it makes him look dumb. If you're going to talk about UBI without nationalizing some industry, at least fucking one industry, you're going to look like an idiot because the only way you're going to get that UBI is through taxation. And then you're just basically fucking siphoning off the private sector, which then you become the middleman. Without nationalizing at least one industry, UBI does not work mathematically. So this is what I'm saying. They just need to have somebody fucking brave enough to say this shit without being fucking scared of being called a communist. Because that's what Andrew Yang's problem was. He was like, his slogan was math. Motherfucker, give me the right math then, because we need at least one industry nationalized for UBI to work. He just wasn't brave enough to say that shit because he wanted that fucking job on CNN or whatever the fuck, or DNC or whatever the job there was that he got, being a fucking not line stepper. Because it's like, if you step over the line, you're not going to get that fucking job after you go in and lose. People are going to become aware of the policies, and now they're going to become aware. But he's really, knowing that he wasn't going to win, he's going after that job at the end of the rainbow because he didn't say the fucking shit that needed to be said to then make people understand not only is UBI possible, but these private industries that are then outsourcing our jobs shouldn't be the arbiters of the fucking profits. The government should, because they're the ones basically facilitating the profit in the first place. So putting these private sector industries in charge of our economic profitability then leaves the populace at the whims of the private sector, who has more influence over the government than we do as individuals. So we're getting fucked on both sides. And then they're telling us it's not possible because Andrew Yang ain't fucking brave enough to say that shit. And that's where it pisses me off.
I think that there needs to be a distinction between a living wage and a thriving wage, because they don't necessarily have to be the same thing. One ensures that you have food and a home and can get to work, and the other one, and I think people, I think there's like this gross misunderstanding of what a living wage actually is, because a thriving wage means you have a fancy car, but a living wage doesn't. A living wage means that you don't have to worry about, being ruined by one health issue, like out of the blue. A thriving wage means you get to take a fucking fancy ass vacation and go out when you want. It's they're not the same thing. And a minimum wage at this point doesn't even get people to the living wage point. I think that's the real problem.
It is not in terms of passing something. And I think you're giving people too much credit in terms of like, if they don't make the something like Medicare for all, if the numbers don't work out, then it discredits Bernie and the policy. Same for UBI. People don't pay attention to that shit. They're not that smart. They don't know what a primary is, generally speaking. They don't know.
I mean, discredits him to me personally.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I could see that.
Speaking for me, like when somebody puts forth a policy that does not work out mathematically, as someone who can do the math, that shit offends me and it discredits them in my eyes. Like, I'm not for anybody else.
So with the minimum wage issue, like, yeah, a lot of people don't know it. You guys do, but I'm just speaking for the podcast. Like, it did start off with intentions of being something that you could support a household off of. It wasn't for, going to something that teenagers would earn at McDonald's or whatever. It wasn't for like just being an entry level, I don't know what, like stock boy. It was supposed to be like something that was that you can support a household on. And now it's just like somehow there was a shift in perception.
Inflation and productivity did not keep pace with each other.
Yeah. Um, and so now we're stuck with the idea of minimum wage as it is. But the real obstacle is not um, whether it is enough, raising it to 15 is enough, but actually the people who are opposed to any minimum wage whatsoever, there, there's people in office who are absolutely just opposed to having a minimum wage. Even Chris Coons thought $15 was too high. It's easier to push for 15 because there's momentum behind it. There was a full um, push for it at the time, and it did make sense. And really, it should be tied to local uh, costs of living. Um, but at the end of the day, what determines whether it will be passed is not like the dollar amount, but whether it's like a more of a fundamental disagreement on whether there should be a minimum wage at all. So, and it's really disheartening actually to think there's people out there that believe, oh, well, the work that you're doing is not that important. It's grueling and you're busting your ass and breaking your body. You don't deserve $15 though. I could just find somebody else to do it.
I mean, it's not disheartening to me. These are people who would want us to be slaves. It's beyond minimum wage. They want us to be slaves. They don't care about us as human beings, and we can't be fucking bargaining with these people. And that's what I'm saying. It's like a mistake to try to bargain with people who want to make other people slaves. That's what I'm saying. The people who are in the position to be bargaining with these people and actually are trying to bargain with them are the same ones that were doing that shit when we were segregated and trying to be like, oh, we gotta fucking make sure we bargain with them because even though they want us to be segregated, they're the ones in power, so we gotta fucking work with them. And that's why we're still the fuck where we are. And that's where I'm saying we can't be perpetuating this type of derailment of actual progress by bargaining with fucking slave owners or wannabe slave owners. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But I think to bring it, I agree fully with that. I'm not like a compromising person in that sense. But when you look at how to implement this, I don't see an option besides electoral politics and organizing to elect grassroots leftist leaders. I think you can't. There's no direct action.
This is what
alternative to $15 an hour minimum wage or legalization of marijuana to prevent people from getting arrested for.
It's going to take several generations. We have to go full French Revolution. It'll take many generations to make sure that those powers don't return. The first generation that initiates revolution will not be able to enjoy the fruits of its labors. The children of the first generation probably won't be able to enjoy it. Their children might, though. The grandchildren of revolution, they might be able to enjoy the overthrowing of corrupt governments, but only if. And here's the long part. There's no instant gratification other than get rid of a bunch of people that we don't like. But that's the dilemma. And this is just this is the template for all revolutions. The way it worked and has worked over time in throughout Europe, the way that it worked for the United States. Things don't get good for anybody immediately, and the challenge is preventing the conditions which allow corruption to gain a foothold from occurring. We you can't reason with someone that wants to work you to death. They're just going to work you to death. I think that's what Chris is saying.
I think there's no telling what that point in time is, though, unless you're actively doing stuff. It's only in retrospect you can see, oh, well, this is the point where people where the change started to happen. And this is the point in time where people actually started to benefit from it, but it was just the beginning. So at that time, they saw benefit, but they didn't believe in it as like a people's revolution. Um, I think like the coming away with it, uh, what would Delaware look like? And because it's totally possible, I think, given the down ballot races, uh, most of the Working Families Party, progressive candidates did win. Only Jess and one city council uh, candidate lost, but like there were 4 or 5 others that won. So that like on a state level, it was a huge victory, and they were overthrowing incumbents who had been there for 20 plus years and 40 plus years, like state reps and state representatives or state senators. Um, how are we doing on time, by the way?
Oh, it's 4 o'clock, but we can keep going.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry to drag it on, but like what? So this movement within Delaware has grown immeasurably since 2016, and then 2018 when they tried to run somebody against Senator Carper, and now 2020, the Jess team is actually it got to be pretty huge. And so, what if in Delaware people actually got on board and actively did things instead of just vote? Because we had a lot of people who were supportive but didn't vote, or I mean, didn't organize. They didn't get out there. And like to the credit, COVID did prevent a lot of things. But what if people actually got to know their neighbors and spread the possibility of change and elected? If we flipped Delaware, which is like my hard goal right now, like long term, then what if we had a living wage and a Medicaid buy-in option and fairly funded schools that were not tied to property tax, but like a statewide funding system that distributes according to need, and students with disabilities who require more funds according to need instead of just property tax, so that low-income kids could have it, and like meals for every child, like how, and there's so much that can be done, and like it would help so many people. I feel like there's a moral imperative, and I'm speaking strictly in Delaware because like I'm coming off hot of the election, the primary election here, but like that sounds sick to me. Like the possibility of something like that happening. The win numbers are so low in this state for a state rep. It's like these people were winning with like 1,200, 1,300 votes. And one of the people I worked for won with by a 44 vote margin. And that was literally the amount of effort and money that I had put in. Like I had phone banked for her, and I could like every person, every volunteer on that in that race counted. So that was cool. So those are my thoughts on like the government. Yeah, we can do things outside of government, but I feel like there really are specific things, specific policies that need to be pushed for within the government, even if it seems like hopeless or a lost cause. What if we had legal marijuana and people weren't being locked up for it here? Because we really do have a bad prison system. Wilmington's really bad. What if we defunded the police? Because it's very possible. We can absolutely flip the city council and the mayor and change the policing system to how we want it. There's locations around the country who are defunding the police as a result of their protests and everything. So yeah. And rant.
Exceptional Radio.
Exceptional Randos Show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening. Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.